ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers
Look
watching
at
on
look
ABC
at that.
and
We're
around
on
the world
time.
tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1.
I am wondering if we should make it small and put something else on the large screen, but that's just me.
1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Okay. These are not going to help. All right, cool.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are
she took
looking
the high
forward to a
ground right off the
spirited
bat.
and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people.
She's going to needle him this entire time.
I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children.
She's clearly a bit nervous, but I think she's going to ease into it.
One of them is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit.
Trump is going to try really hard here.
My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a
20%
tax
and he does not
on
like that,
everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
Yeah, these are good attacks.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that.
She came out
We're
swinging.
doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't.
She's going to needle him to try and get him to say the sexist and racist things.
They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history.
Oh, man, he has
we were
no
at
idea what he's talking
21%,
about,
but
Doug.
that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for
It's
people,
late
for
for
the
him.
middle class, but
That's
for every
what's off.
class. On top of that, we have millions
Sleepy
of people
time.
pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield,
Oh,
Ohio.
she's gonna rock
You look
him.
at Aurora
Look
in
at this.
Colorado. They are taking
She's
over
mogging
the towns.
him
They're taking
in
over
real
buildings.
time.
They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country.
Black jobs.
They're dangerous.
Ask him what a
They're
black
at the
job
highest
is.
level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but
The Venezuelan
I would
gang.
like to let Vice President Harris respond
Covered
on
it.
the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And
Get
what we
his
have done
ass.
is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again.
She's doing what I do sometimes,
believe very
Jack.
strongly that the American people want a president who
She's just
understands
telling
the
you what's
importance
gonna happen.
of bringing us together.
Makes her
and
look
we have
so
much
good.
more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here. to
He
respond.
literally nodded
Number one, I have
along.
nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not
Story,
going to
thank you
read
for
it. This
subscribing.
was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas. I guess some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book.
chose
Everybody
the
knows what I'm
VP
going to do.
pick
Cut
of
taxes
Project
very
2025.
substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a
She's
pandemic.
mogging
and the
him.
pandemic
It's
was
crazy.
not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where
man.
the economy and where the stock
He's
market was
doubling
higher
down
than it
on
was
his
before the
pandemic
pandemic
response.
came
This
in.
is so good.
Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
makes him look
We
so
made
bad to his
ventilators for
audience.
the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the
We got
military. They give me
masks.
credit for a lot of things,
Impossible
but not
task.
enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President
Guys,
Harris,
we're
I'll
like
let you
2
respond.
minutes in. He's already so
So-
mad.
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best
Salmon Moose,
economists
thank you for
in
the
our
tier 4
country,
sub.
if not the
Ooh,
world,
Bibble.
have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look.
Just by the way, I want to pause real quick. The Wharton School reference. Donald Trump went to Wharton for college in the 60s, okay? Like she's deliberately needling under his skin, and it's getting to him so hard.
At where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that.
He can't do it.
I went to the Wharton
His
School
mic
of
is on.
Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan.
Oh,
It's a plan
man.
that's going to
He's gonna
bring
be
up
losing it.
our
Give her,
worth,
like,
our
5 more
value as a
minutes.
country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our,
Oh,
for
my
our country.
God.
And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
4 sentences.
Mr. President, I
like
do want to drill
run,
down on
spot,
something you
run.
both brought
That's
up.
4
The
sentences.
Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming
my
into this
God.
country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs
Yeah.
the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can
We
afford
rely
higher
on a
prices
global
because
economy.
of
They're
tariffs?
not going to
Stuff
have
comes
higher
in,
prices.
stuff
What's
goes
going to
out.
have, and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy.
His
And all you have
last
to do is
tariff
look at a
cost
poll.
us more
The
than our
polls
entire
say
nuclear
80
arsenal
and 85
combined.
and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having, on the short end of the stick, in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point. When we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like
Oh,
they have.
man,
I don't
he
say
just
her
walked
because she
into a
has
trap.
no policy.
He just walked into a
Everything
trap.
that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it.
I just realized that me throwing things up on screen is not going to help because it's all mirrored. God damn it. The thing I threw up before, the last tariff cost more than all of our nuclear forces combined. And the one I just threw up is that the CHIPS Act was specifically designed to bring back American manufacturing of silicon chips.
Policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris
like that
says
she's
that
bringing
women
back the
shouldn't
shoulder
trust you
pads.
on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execute.
Hey, can we get abortion in like the, I don't know, 527,000th month? Can we get that? Can we get that kind of abortion?
Execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do.
Keep in mind, exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother are not actual exceptions. They don't exist. You cannot prove any of those conditions in the time frame it takes to have a baby. And that is just cold, hard facts.
Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Oh, man.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch
job.
of lies. And
Good
that's
moderating.
not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life.
Yep.
Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade,
And he just
as
has to sit
President
there
of the
and take
United
it.
States,
This is
I
so
will
good.
proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American
True.
people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body,
Oh, he can't say
should
anything.
not
It's
be made by
killing
the
him.
government.
Thank you, Vice President
He's dying
Harris.
Well, there she
inside.
goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else.
She's
and
mocking
every
him.
legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time.
Bringing it
but
back,
for
bringing it back to the states is a way of getting a national abortion ban.
52 years, this issue has torn
That's
our
their
country
pathway.
apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things.
He can't
Number
say
one,
yes.
she said
He
she'll go
can't
back to
say
Congress. She'll
yes.
never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the
Oh, he's
50-50
screwed.
and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk.
Ask
you know
another
what it
follow-up.
reminds me of? When they said
Do
they're going
it.
to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he
No,
went
I
out,
said
got
he is
rejected
screwed.
again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got
He is screwed. He can't answer the question like directly. He can't even lie and say, yes, I would veto a ban because his audience would get so mad. It would literally threaten his chances of winning.
wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans.
Oh, he can't
Couples
stand
who
a woman
pray
telling him no.
and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers.
She's
to
hitting
go
him with
and
the
get
Restoro
healthcare she
tactic.
needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing,
I never want to hear him say that
You should
again.
ask.
A leader on fertilization.
will she allow abortion
You.
in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her
Why-
that
why
question?
don't you
That's
answer
the
the
problem.
question, would you
Because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question,
you
would you
could
veto?
do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
No.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know
Just in case anyone doesn't know, that has never ever been the case.
it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly.
This is
But
gonna
my
be bad,
question
yeah.
to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill?
This is a
Donald
good
Trump
strat.
got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
Okay, this
And
was
I'll tell you
maybe
something,
the
he's
best
gonna
way
talk
she
about
could have
immigration
answered
a lot
this.
tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal
dude.
Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him
Dude.
talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires.
This is good.
And I'll tell you, I
Oh my
believe
God.
you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you
He's-
that I will.
Vice
Look at
President
him,
Harris,
he's
thank you. President Trump,
dying.
on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's busing them in
People
and
don't go
paying
to
them
her
to be there.
rallies?
And then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions
he's
and
so
millions of
full of
people to
piss
come
and
into our
vinegar.
country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns
Yeah,
don't
no
want
one-
to talk about
no
it
one
because they're
goes to
so
her
embarrassed by
rallies.
it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're
What?
eating. They're eating
What
the
is he
pets
talking
of
about?
the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our
Oh
country.
my God, he
and
brought
it's a
it- he
shame.
brought that
As far
talking
as
point.
rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They
that
want
is
to
the
make
current
America
meme
great
among
again. It's a very simple
conservatives.
phrase. Make America great again. She's
Oh my
destroying this
God.
country, And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there had been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I've also seen reruns of the Avengers movie on television. That doesn't make it real.
I'm not taking this from
But
television.
the people are
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
No one's eating
Again, the
dogs.
Springfield
This
city
is
manager
just a
says there's no
crazy
evidence of that.
lie.
Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
Immediately justifying her point.
This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member
God,
Liz
that's
Cheney.
not good.
And if you want to really know
Don't list that as a
the inside
positive
track
quality.
on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States.
It's true.
His former national security advisor has
Oh,
said he is
look at him.
dangerous and unfit.
He's doing the butthole thing with his
former
mouth.
Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
when
yeah.
I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who
You invited the
were just
Taliban to
killed,
Camp
viciously
David
and
on
violently
September
killed. And I
11th,
got to know
bro.
the parents and the family. They
What are you
didn't fire. They
talking
should have fired
about?
all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the
Dude.
most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So
Oh,
when
he's
somebody
walking
does a
into
bad
her
job,
traps left
I'd
and right.
fire
This
him.
is Sideshow
And you take a
Bob
guy
and the
like
rakes all
Esper,
over
he was no
again.
good. I fired him, so he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me they can write books. With nobody else can they? But
He
they
released
have done
all
such
of
a
the
poor job,
Taliban
and they
prisoners
never
we had
fire anybody. Look at the
to
economy.
give himself an
look
easier
look at
election
the inflation.
season.
They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what
That's
you
not
wanted to talk
true.
about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S.
With local
military.
police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals.
Man, I really
They
feel like
allowed
she should have been able to
terrorists. They
respond
allowed
there.
common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country, and they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof.
it is
despite
actually
their fraudulent
going down.
statements that they made.
He's just
crime
lying.
in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form
Crime
of
by
crime. It's
every
called
metric
migrant
is
crime,
down.
and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris, I'll
FBI
give you
they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime.
He's
it was
just
a
lying.
fraud. Just like their number of
Oh my
818,000
God,
jobs
dude.
that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security
Get 'em.
crimes, economic crimes, election interference.
Oh, she's
has been
looking at him
found
as she says
liable
it.
for sexual assault,
Oh,
and
get
his
'em.
next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing.
Get him.
And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice
He's
president
getting
called
more
for
and more
defunding
enraged.
federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court.
He's a
I'm winning
convicted
most of them.
felon.
But those are
You-
cases, it's
on,
called
like,
weaponization.
34
Never
charges.
happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're
President Trump-
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Where are
Well,
you,
let's
Joe?
talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies.
Maybe he shouldn't have said those
Someone who
things.
has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
We gotta
This is the
continue
one
here.
that weaponized.
Oh, he's
not me.
losing it, bro.
She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy.
he's
It was a
losing
fake
it.
Russia
can't-
investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get.
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to.
He
Lindsay?
can't control
Vice
himself.
President Harris, in your last run for
Slur
president, you said
incoming
you
in
wanted
5.
to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States, and in fact, I was
She should,
the
though.
tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My
You should
position
ban it,
is
though.
that we
The
have
planet
got
is dying.
to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was
Yeah, and
given
everyone
a
in
fraction
Brooklyn
of that,
hates
a tiny
you, buddy.
fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people
Yeah,
see it,
after
they are
you inherited
even
it from your
surprised.
dad.
So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly.
He said the
and
opposite of
everybody's
what he
laughing
meant to
at it,
say.
Okay, they're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out. She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your
Bro,
guns,
if you're a
and she will never
conservative,
allow
how
fracking
can you
in
swallow
Pennsylvania.
this garbage?
If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one.
He literally
Just to
said they're
finish
going
one
to
thing, so
trans
important
the
in my opinion.
immigrants.
So I got the
What?
oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
they're
soil.
just letting
These
him
are not good
talk.
things for the
This is
environment.
crazy.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office.
It's true.
You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2
covered
hours
it
before
live.
you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. peacefully.
then you didn't do anything
and
about it for
patriotically.
hours.
And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her.
They
It's
were
a
breaking through the
disgrace.
windows
But
of the
we
Capitol
didn't
like
do
a zombie
this group
movie.
of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the
Chanting
people
that
that are
they
pouring
wanted to
into our
hang
country
the
and
vice
killing
president?
people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, "Oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet." That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people
He's going
from
crazy,
countries all
Doug.
over the world, not just South America?
She just needs
They're
to, like,
coming
push
in
him a
from
little bit
all
more. He's gonna
over
lose it.
The world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned
Dude.
down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They
When I
took over a
judged
big
rhetoric,
percentage of
we
the city of
deducted
Seattle.
points for
When are
going
those
over
people
time
going to be
like this.
prosecuted?
Fair.
But let
yeah.
me just
Thank you
ask
for
you.
the
You might
$5
ask her that
dono.
question.
You were the president. You were
fun
watching
fact.
it unfold on television.
They did prosecute the people who burned down Minneapolis. And guess what? They were conservative. They were Boogaloo boys. They were Trump supporters.
It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big.
I had nothing to
went
do
to
with it.
Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, this is
Why
going to be a
are you
very
letting him
big
answer like
rally
this?
or whatever you want
Mute
to call
him.
it. And
You
again,
wanted a
it
yes/no
wasn't done by me. It
response.
was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi
this is
was
exactly
responsible.
what
She
Kamala
didn't do her
Harris
job.
wanted.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was,
I covered it live.
I say, we don't have
remember.
to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
Oh,
It was a different term, and it was a
Leave
term
him
that
muted.
related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has
The
been, as you
real
would say,
bloodbath
debunked. Laura
was the
Ingraham,
energy business.
Sean Hannity, Jesse,
Not the people
all
who
of
actually
these people
died.
They covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol.
You tried to
Why are
overthrow
we
democracy
allowing
one time
these
and never let
millions
it
of
go.
people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be
Yeah,
very
we
proud
are
to do
producing
it.
more oil
I
than
would
we
say
have
would
ever
both
produced
leave
before
this
in
debate
America.
right now.
Right now.
I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C., and let her sign a bill to close
Mute
up the
him.
border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4
Oh, yeah,
o'clock
we
in
don't
the
need to
afternoon,
pass
you'll say, "Come on,
legislation.
come on
Just
down to
make
the
the
office,
president
let's
a
sign bill."
dictator.
If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to
The
do is
bill
say it
needs
to
to
the
be
Border
passed by
Patrol, who are
Congress.
phenomenal. If
That's
they
how
do
bills
that, the
work.
border
He
is
hasn't
closed.
watched
the- Mr.
Those
President.
people are killing many people.
I wanna-
Unlike
He hasn't
J6.
watched the-
We talked
what is a
immigration here
bill?
tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really brings us this into focus, truth
Oh my
in
God.
these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost
Yeah.
in
No, I
2020?
don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say that.
sarcastically. You
But
know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically.
A common
Look,
sarcastic saying.
There's
I
so
see.
much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting
Which is what
president
your
has ever gotten.
riot
I was
was
told that I
about,
got
man.
63, which was what I got in 2016. You can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need
He's
two things.
doubling
We need
down on
walls,
overthrowing
we
democracy.
need- and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak
Why are-
English. They don't
why are
even
they
know what
letting him
country
talk
they're in
like this?
practically. And these people are trying to get them
Why?
to vote. And
Mute
that's
him.
why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't
Mute
detect
him.
the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No
Republican.
judge looked at it.
And said
They
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing.
You had
They
60
said we didn't have
judges look at
standing,
it.
a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to
That's
have you do a
insane.
special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show
Oh,
you
man,
Wisconsin,
dog.
and I'll show
Take
you
'em up on that
Pennsylvania,
offer.
and I'll show
That's free
we have
content
so
right
many
there.
facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news, and the problem that we have right now is we have a
You're right, Barry
nation in
Knifey Duck.
decline,
But, like,
and they have
this
put
isn't-
it into
this is
decline. We have a nation
unacceptable.
that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Victor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person.
Victor Orban,
Smart.
one of the globally
Prime Minister
recognized
of Hungary.
dictators, loves
They
me.
said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it
Kim
blowing up?
Jong-un loves
He said,
me.
because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
North Korea,
and Biden
top
put
concern.
it back on day one,
Hungary.
but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got
President.
14
Where are you,
million
Joe?
votes. They
I
threw
miss
him
you.
out. She got 0 votes.
I
and
miss
when
you,
she
Joe.
ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running.
Where are
I don't
you?
understand it, but
Mr.
I'm
President,
okay with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I think
up.
we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through
This
the
is a
stalemate.
bad question for
How would
her.
you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel
boy.
has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end.
Oh.
It must end immediately.
This might be where Donald
and
Trump
the way it will end is we need a
drops a
ceasefire
racism.
deal and we need the hostages out.
This is actually
And
the
so
most
we will
likely
continue
point.
to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in
this isn't an
particular
answer to the
as
question.
it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians
But this
have
isn't like an
security,
answer to the question.
self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. if she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one.
You've been pretty
She
good at
hates Israel.
predictions.
At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone.
What are you talking about?
It would have never happened. Iran was broke under
he's
Donald
a regular
Trump.
psychotic.
Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah.
Iran
or
was
any
doing
of the
fine
28
until you undid the deal. You
spheres
gave them
of
the ability to
terror.
make
And they are
nukes.
spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself.
Like Viktor Orban.
It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant.
It's good
It
that
is
she's
well
able to
known
list
he
these specific
exchanged
examples.
love letters with Kim Jong-un, and it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors.
Oh, dude.
And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace.
Oh.
That is why.
Look at
we
how she's talking
understand
to
that
him.
We have to have a president who is
Oh.
not consistently
He can't even
weak
look at
and
her.
wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her
Crime
last
rates
week.
are way
Said, I
down?
hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent.
Crime
and they
whites.
are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic
Oh,
ABC
they-
News
oh, they
presidential
did
debate
cut
from the
him off.
National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Oh my God. This is incredible.
The
Incredible,
ABC
incredible
News
stuff.
presidential debate will continue.
Guys, this is quality content. Now, folks, hit the follow button on Twitch, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, like the YouTube stream, and folks, please consider dropping those subs and donos. Support the stream. I haven't been able to make those calls this stream, but Thistles for Eyes, thank you for the $20 super chat.
Humanitarian law must be
Now
respected.
is the time.
But more than that, our government needs to uphold its own laws on foreign military aid.
It's true. It's true. I think that this has the potential, like, there's another 45 minutes of this chat. I think this has the potential to really do some damage. Folks, also consider sharing the stream with your friends, your family, whoever, because frankly, this is it. Let's get this in front of more people. I need to pee really, really badly, but I will be right back. Speed challenge. Speed challenge.
I think Kamala can ratchet this up even harder. She's been twisting the screws, and he's wound up, but she needs to really go hard. BWA. I'm back. We did it. It's not back yet. Paladin, thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs. Let's go. Think Kamala can ratchet this up even harder? I think so. I think this has all been the warm up, you know? So far, I think the mirroring is working. I think this is going well. I do think that there have been some times where she's been taken a little bit aback by some of the questions. But I need to blow my nose. Sorry about that. Whew. And folks, this show is only made possible by viewers like you. Thank you all for tuning in, and we're about to go back to it here, but do consider supporting the stream however you can. Remember, hit those buttons. Hit the buttons. Consider dropping those subs and donos. They're all very much appreciated and the only thing that make this show possible. So, with that being said, let's dive back into it, huh?
Back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
Yeah, I am taking a big risk, Simric.
I want the war to
Big
stop.
risk.
I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening.
He's just
We're
saying
in for
he's going to surrender.
250 to
Like, what?
275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship.
It's killing
and they
him that he
respect
wasn't able to respond
your
to what she said
president,
after
okay?
the last
They
time.
respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building
Conservative commentator Eric Erickson just wrote, "You stupid motherfuckers just got Trump to repeat your lie about the pets. Congrats on getting the news stories tomorrow by lying." So Trump picks it up and says stupid shit. Oh, man. Oh, this is so delicious.
soldiers. He did it after I left.
Amazing
I said,
stuff.
Oh,
good work,
he must be
team.
negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president?
He's
but we have
still
a president
sad about
that
Biden,
doesn't know he's
man.
alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify on the
He's
question,
so sad.
do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity.
He
And I
can't
met
look
with
at her.
President Zelensky. I
He
shared
can't
with
do
him
it.
American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine.
Yeah, no negotiation
Understand
can really
why the
move
European
forward
allies and our
as long as
NATO
Russia's
allies
making territorial
are so
claims
thankful that you are no
on
longer
Ukraine.
president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a
Dude,
friendship
this is
with
a good-
what is known to be a dictator
Good
who would
tactic.
eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight.
Oh.
Afghanistan came up in
You
the last
just
hour.
witnessed a murder,
I wanted her to
Chad.
respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in
Man,
Moscow.
they let him talk nonstop.
Much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And
Yeah, and if he
eventually,
uses them,
maybe he'll use them, and maybe
Russia's
going to
be obliterated.
But he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent
Walz is
her
gonna
to
manhandle
negotiate
Vance.
peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid.
If he
They
had
said the
nuclear
wrong
weapons,
things.
why
That
did he
war should
even
have
need to
never
invade
started.
Trump?
She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later.
Vice
And
President?
that's the kind of talent we have with her.
That's actually
She's worse
insane.
than Biden.
That
In my
he's-
opinion,
he's
I think he's
just
the worst
pulling
president
stuff out
in
of
the
his
history
ass
of our
at this
country.
point.
She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent
he's
on
getting
our
so mad.
ability to look out for our friends.
keep getting under
and
his
not
skin.
favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying
Why even
almost
bother with
all
the
of
muted
NATO.
mics?
We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before.
He's
if
been
you
given
don't
like
pay,
twice the
we're not going
time
to protect
that
you.
she
Otherwise,
has.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill honoring the
tell him
soldiers who
no.
died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban.
Yep.
The negotiation involved the
Get 'em.
Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this. No,
High
get this.
profile, too.
And the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place
Get his
of
ass.
storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected
Just
world
days
leaders.
before September
And
11th, too.
This former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role
He invited them
and
to Camp David instead of the Afghan
of
government.
the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect.
Circumvented
And
their
this gets
government.
back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response
That
to her
pause
saying
was
that you
great.
began the
Yeah,
negotiations
thank
with
you.
the Taliban.
So, if you take
Yeah,
a look
thank
at
you.
that period
Please.
of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved
And
with
you
the Taliban
used up all of our
because
leverage.
the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within
To give yourself
Afghanistan.
a
They don't bother
smoother
doing that
campaign.
because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we
The current leader of the Taliban is named Hibatullah Akhundzada, which I probably butchered, but it's not Abdul.
most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you.
40 months.
I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something, I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I don't
asking.
know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember
Yeah, Matt Walsh knows that this
how
is
Donald
bad.
Trump started. He was
This is great.
a land, he owned land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual
Yep, he did.
who took out
That's
a
true.
full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther
This is
lies
really
about the
good.
first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want
He
better
still
than
thought
that.
the Central Park
Want
5
better
should have been
than this.
executed after they were
Want
exonerated.
someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is
Stop
the most
interrupting the
divisive
moderators.
presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said
You
they
thought
pled
they should have
guilty.
been executed after they were
And I said,
exonerated
well,
like
if they
5
pled
years
guilty,
ago.
They badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the
'cause you
history
broke
of the
the
world.
law and got
I'm gonna build
punished
it again.
for it.
It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger.
You're
But they're
still the
destroying
same
our
guy.
economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this.
Honestly, he needs to be
She
asked
is
directly
Biden.
about
You know,
the
she's
Central
trying
Park
to get away
5.
from Biden. I don't know the gentleman. She says, she is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad.
He's still
she can't
proud
get
of
away
trying
with
to get
that.
5 boys killed.
I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as
Ms.
opposed to a
Milena, I hope
conversation
that
that
happens.
is constantly about belittling and name calling.
Oh man, look at how
Let's turn
upset
the
he
page
is.
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She
please.
has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking
He's so
in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay,
That's
he's
what
so
her plan
cooked.
is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
No,
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he
President
has said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long
Man,
vowed to
they've
repeal
let
and
him
replace
talk
the
for
Affordable
like
Care
10
Act,
minutes.
also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care. Always was. It's not very good today.
Every time he
said
speaks
that if
over,
we
it's
come
fine.
up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it.
Oh,
They
now
were
you
unanimous.
inherited
They
something.
wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in this
Dragonfly, that would be so
administration.
good. I don't
we
think
read
she's
about the
gonna do
bad
it,
ones.
though.
We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now.
I have
But
concepts
if
of a plan, a
we
dream.
come up with something,
whiff
I would
of a
only change
plan.
it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there
Oh
are
my
concepts
God.
and options we have to do that.
Oh
and you'll
my
be hearing
God.
about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you
I had a
supported
dream
Bernie
of a
Sanders'
plan.
proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system.
A whisper
2 years
of a
later, you
plan.
proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear
just
my
announce
position
Medicare
on
for all
fracking,
and
then
win
this
the
business
election.
about taking
That's all you
everyone's
gotta do,
guns
really.
away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous
Oh, she's a
lying
gun owner
about this
too.
stuff.
Interesting.
As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president,
Suppose that makes
60
sense.
times he tried to
Former
get rid
prosecutor,
of the Affordable Care
like, it
Act.
makes sense,
60
guys.
times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to
having
this
an actual
is
plan
that
here
access to health
in
care
comparison
should be
to a
right
concept of a
and not
plan
just a privilege of
makes
those
him
who
look
can afford
so
it.
bad.
And the plan has to be
It makes him
to
look so
strengthen
bad.
the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Past his
President
prologue
Harris,
in
thank
terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a
She
lot
made a
of
mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get.
President
People
Trump-
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where
God,
you wait
I wish.
6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump,
I
thank you. We have
wish-
another issue that we'd like to get to that's
I
important
wish
for a
we
number
had
of
government
Americans, in
health care.
particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Same
Well, the
knifey.
former president had said the climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can
Rising
actually
water
deal with
levels,
this issue. The young people
more
of America care
wildfires.
deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. They're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by
did
China.
that when
They're
you were a
building
president.
these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have
do
given
that
to China
already.
is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto
Why
Workers.
is she the only one
and
with the
any
time
auto
limit?
worker,
Because she's the
whether
only
it's
one
in
expected to
Detroit
be
or
reasonable.
South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it.
Biden.
Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News
Oh,
presidential
man,
debate
dude.
from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
I'm not gonna lie, this has been extremely cathartic to watch. Folks, so far Kamala Harris has been doing great. Obviously, I wish she had better policy proposals, but rhetorically in this, she has been absolutely nailing it. And folks, if you're enjoying the show, if you're enjoying my commentary, hopefully, please hit that follow button on Twitch, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and like the goddamn YouTube stream. And please consider dropping those subs, those donos, those memberships, because viewer support is what allows me to continue making this show. I don't make enough money off of the ad revenue for sure to make this show work. So you guys are the ones who make this possible. Looking forward to the Walz-Vance debate. Oh, that's going to be great. It's going to be great. No, there's not 6 likes. There's 120 likes, but you know what? There's a good 250-ish people watching the stream right now over on YouTube, and I think you guys can hit 150, okay? I think you guys, 120 is rookie numbers. I think you can hit 150, all right? You a JoJo fan or just a Yes fan? I have not watched enough JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I've only seen the first season, and I've been told that's the worst one. To be honest, as a lover of a true moderated debate, I haven't enjoyed a debate in a long time. This is entertainment. Oh yeah, this is pure blood sports. You know, like this is good. This is good stuff. Love your content. Trin, that's A-okay. I understand. It's hard to stomach 90 minutes of Donald Trump. The concept of a plan is, I think that is going to stick. It's gonna stick. It's gonna sink him, man. I think this is genuinely worst case scenario for conservatives. What is this? Okay, I mean, true. This is good. This is good. I have the concept of a plan. Here, just unmirror it real quick. It's good. The only thing off here is that people actually like Star-Lord, and people do not like Donald Trump. Go. Good job, Gayfesh. Not Jayfesh. I do not like Star-Lord. That's fine. That's fair. Chris Pratt does suck. Rhizome tomorrow is going to be the most copium. Oh, it's going to be so good the rest of this week.
The rest of this week is going to be so good, chat. The amount of cope we are already seeing from conservatives is legendary. And we're only going to be seeing more of it, guys. Only going to be seeing more of it. What did Chris Pratt do? He's just kind of an asshole behind the scenes of his films. Let's see. Matt Walsh is blaming the moderators for moderating. Well, yeah, because facts are inconvenient to fascists. Tim Walz, meanwhile, is just out there saying Kamala Harris is used to taking on predators, fraudsters, and corporate stooges. Come to think of it, tonight's debate is no different. Like, they're just mogging Donald Trump the entire time. Well, folks, we're about to jump back into it, but remember, hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and please consider dropping those subs, donos, memberships, etc., because the show relies on your support. Let's get back to it.
The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked
I am taking on the risk,
or a
Mish.
witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat?
Strongest
the only thing I
leftist
ever asked
warrior.
them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years.
She's the
They've
vice
had
president.
3.5 years
The
to
vice
fix
president
the border.
can't do
They've
that.
had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things
vice
we
president
talked
can't
about.
do that.
Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down
That's
to
not
that
the vice
beautiful
president's
White
job.
House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in.
What are you talking
believe in
about?
Things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it.
Trump will
We
have his
can't
plan ready in 2
sacrifice
weeks.
our country for the sake
Catalina
of bad
Gearbox,
vision.
thank you for the $5
But I just
dono.
ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All
Yeah,
over
no,
the
no,
world
no.
they're laughed. I know
You're
the leaders very
being
well.
laughed
They're
at.
coming to see me. They call me. We're
You are
laughed
being
at
laughed
all
at.
over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military.
My God.
She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
Man,
President
it sounds like you
Trump,
should have
thank
more than a
you.
concept
And
of a
that is
plan
our
then.
ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
That was wild.
And that concludes the ABC presidential debate. C-SPAN's coverage of it continues here tonight with viewer reaction and reaction on the ground from the candidates' supporters. You can see reporters swarming
swap back.
there in the spin room. Let's go down
Trump,
into the spin room at the Philadelphia Convention Center and listen in.
She's moving in the right direction, showing up in the right parts of our state.
Here, I think we can mute this. It's not super important, I think. Yeah, Kamala Harris won that debate, hands down. Like, there are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know, like, she absolutely demolished him. And frankly, like, he just couldn't hold it together. Like, he lost his F. Trump, is there a grade lower than F? Yeah, no, it is really incredible. He's not able to control himself. He couldn't resist talking about, well, my crowd sizes were bigger. You know, my crowd sizes. He actually unironically did the Obama bit. Unironically did the Obama bit. It's crazy. You know, like, usually, if this was a normal election year, I think that Donald Trump would probably try and gun for a second debate. I don't think he wants to try that again. That was his first time interacting with Kamala Harris one-on-one. And he absolutely, like, got rocked. There was nothing he could do about that. He just kept getting angry, kept flailing, both literally and figuratively. And he admitted in front of the entire country that he had the concept of a plan. And, like, that's how he operates. He doesn't have plans. This entire time, he couldn't name a single plan he has. When asked about foreign policy, he just, like, complained about Joe Biden and said that Viktor Orban really likes him, and that's his plan. What's his plan for Russia? Well, Putin really likes him, and, you know, we'd just basically abandon Ukraine. You know? But the thing is, Rhombus, when we're talking about, like, the rhetorical position he's taking, usually people aren't able to get him to be like, yeah, I don't have a plan. Because that's rhetorically a non-starter. It is an absolute demolition of his entire position and standing for him to look into the camera and say he doesn't have a plan, which he just did. He just did that. He defended efforts to overturn democracy. He mentioned the Vuvuzela gangs, the Venezuelan gangs in Aurora, Colorado that we just finished talking about. He talked about how people are roaming around the streets of America eating cats and dogs because he got duped by conservative propaganda. Like, there is literally no part of this debate where he did well And the only people who could watch this and think that he did well are people who are too lost in the Trump sauce to actually have any ability to discern, like, fact from fiction. You know, like, he's gone. The only people who are staying with him are going to be his base, and that's not enough to win him this election. You know, there's a reason why, like, Matt Walsh is doomering on his Twitter timeline right now. There's a reason why conservatives are just absolutely devastated having watched this. It is wild.
This is what it looks like when Laura Loomer is on your debate prep team.
Yeah, no kidding. Holy moly, guys. Very Knifey Duck, thank you for the $5 dono and for supporting the stream. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. I do have to say, I did think that he was going to call her a Palestinian. I thought that he was going to, like, try the using Palestinian as a slur again. I did think that he was going to do a few more things, like, I thought he might, like, do, like, an old school racism type thing, like use an outdated slur or stereotype against her, especially when, like, the conversation turned on her race. A lot of stuff like that. I thought we were going to get a bit more of that, but he was just too flustered to even be racist, like mask off racist. No, very Knifey Duck all day today. Conservatives have been, like, jokingly posting about Haitian immigrants eating cats. And he's super online, so he definitely saw that, and it just tumbled out of his mouth. I guarantee you no one told him to say that. Or was it just fear? Maybe. Oh,
Howdy, friends.
Crane.
People hug. I am in a good mood and spreading the vibe. Love y'all.
OS Crane, thank you for the $5 dono, and yeah, fair. That went about as well as we could have hoped for. Like, barring Donald Trump actually shitting himself live on stage, physically shitting himself. He obviously emotionally and rhetorically did that. But barring, like, a actual physical poop bit in his pants, I think that went about as well as we possibly could have hoped.